Joey. Hi, everyone. My name's Suren. And I think I just want to maybe set up the topic before I climb into it. I'm going to try to cover two parts because just climbing into security is probably a bit too scary for this time of day. So I want to give you some context before I get into that. Just quickly a little bit about how I ended off in, I don't know, sometimes I think about running a 24/7 cybersecurity business is not exactly my idea of fun, or shouldn't be anyone's idea of fun. And I actually chose engineering. My mother wanted me to be a doctor, but I think she'll be all right with the choices I've made so far. So, as a technologist and also someone who has operated in the healthcare space for a number of years, we tend to go on with our normal lives, and until one day you realize, actually, I should have spent more time or paid more attention to the issues around our data security. So, I think the first thing that we all should do is go back to our practices and businesses and have a good hard look at the technology we are relying on, the software, the cloud, the whatever we've bought. And you might find you might have to file for what I call technical bankruptcy. And the reason I say this is when you attempt to, actually it's almost peculiar to the healthcare industry, which has been quite immune to change. I won't even say resistant, I'll say immune to change. Primarily because it is a human-to-human interaction from the beginning to end. But we're starting to rely on the systems and specifically the data set in them. So my first bit of advice is go have a look at what tech you're running, whether it is suitable and whether it is secure. You should almost try to disrupt from within, use tech to disrupt, and that's something that I've used in many instances over the years. You almost have to think about this as a reset. We mustn't forget that this thing we use quite widely every day, email. Email was invented in 1971, right? And we're still using the same old tech, the same protocol, but we've had to patch the security around it. Is this still okay? So you are now being pulled into ecosystems. You're now being pulled into platforms. And you've got to pay attention to how you access it and where it sits. And we'll get into that as I touch on the main issues of data security. So maybe slightly controversial, but my own personal view is that your patients should come second. I think we all learned the very hard lesson during the pandemic that when we put our staff first, we actually had better control over the outcomes with patients. And when I refer to staff, I mean our colleagues or anyone who has access to our data. Richard Branson is a strong proponent of this, saying that your employees come first, and if you take care of them, they will take care of your clients. So when we talk about digital transformation, we tend to think again about the tech. But I want to highlight that this is actually more about the data than it is about the tech. So data has, a number of characteristics that are key for us to, firstly, I suppose, have a relationship with. We must be able to trust the data we have and store. We must build a culture of data usage and even in data integrity with our teams or our users. And finally, we must look for value in that data. There's no point having gigabytes and terabytes of data, and I think Peter made the point quite well, if we're not using it and mining it, which Discovery and others do very smartly. So, I know the data topic is a difficult one for if you're a primary healthcare practitioner, because that's not your domain. That's not your, it doesn't get you excited. And I often say to my team, if you torture the data enough, it will confess the facts eventually. And you've got to have that approach. You've got to you've got to hit it hard and make sure that you are keeping only what you need. So in the healthcare space, again, we kind of take design for granted because we are focused on treatment or we're focused on care. My view, again, is design equals care, because if you care for something, you're going to design it appropriately. Steve Jobs reminded us that if you design something, or design is not what something looks like, it's how it actually works. So bring design thinking into your practices, and start thinking about how do you encapsulate this competence, which is one aspect of being a healthcare professional, and on the other side, compassion. These are difficult things for AI to replicate at the moment. Maybe competence, but hard for compassion. And that's the human factor that we have to still build for, while still maintaining security again. All right, and then just a bit about how we got here. So we've been through, this, I suppose, whirlwind of technology over the last, let's call it 40, 50 years. And it really had a big boost with the internet, mobile phones, and then more recently, it's almost the pandemic drove us to work from home, or many of us to work from home. It drove a high level of mobile adoption, or even mobile working, and that in itself came with its own set of challenges, because it made our data a lot more accessible and public. So whatever the point here is, whatever we are going to change, and I'm going to now get into a little case study, but whatever we find we need to change, be deliberate about it. You cannot do tech transformation or data security half-hearted, right? So let's climb into it. I want to, this is a practice I've made up, but based on a real practice that like Peter, I think we're quite fond of our GPs, it looks like. I've named this one MedZone. So think about MedZone, tranquil suburb, quite kind of idyllic. Probably all of us have this vision of what this perfect GP practice looks like. But more importantly, a GP practice is part of the community. It's not just a place you go to get well. It is very much, the doctor's part of the community. The staff know their patients well. They know their stories. They know their tribulations. It's very much a relationship. It's not transactional. And all of this is based on a very high level of trust between doctor and patient and the doctor's staff. So imagine if this were to happen. You turn up at your practice one morning, your staff turn on their computers, and then you see this. So if you see this, the game is pretty much over. Lockbit are one of about 2,000 hacker groups around the world. We run a dark web monitoring service that monitors about 100 of them, monitor their activity, their methods. And last year, so this is big business. Ransomware is very big business. And simply what happens is, if someone were to gain unauthorized access to your systems and data, they make a copy of it, and they take that copy away. They encrypt all your data, meaning without a key that they hold, you're unable to access that data again. And then they want a ransom from you to get your own data back. So that's what just happened to poor MedZone. Now, last year, this ransomware, let's call it business, was worth about $1 billion. Lockbit were responsible for a quarter of that in terms of ransom paid. A few weeks ago, Lockbit, so this is kind of a almost third world war going on, but a few weeks ago, Lockbit were then taken down by a big law enforcement group led by the likes of the FBI, etc. And they took down Lockbit, and they put this up on their website. About 2 weeks after that, Lockbit were back. And the first site that they hacked was the FBI site. All right, so you get it. It sounds like, yeah, okay, it's some fun and games, but it actually is debilitating. So, quickly, what's happening in South Africa is that, South Africa is under attack. Healthcare in particular is a soft target, typically because of the valuable data you sit with, as well as the known poor controls that you run in protecting that data. And you know, I will be sharing slides. So if you want copies, you can grab from Joey and team. So if MedZone were one of these victims, and MedZone, let's call it a single doctor practice with 2 or 3 other staff, it would probably take them out for a couple of weeks to a month, and it would probably cost them a few $100,000, if not an entire replacement of all of their tech investment, and potentially the entire loss of all of their data, all their patient data, and every other piece of data that they hold. So a very recent, and this is being called the most debilitating attack in the US. This took place on the 21st of Feb this year. United Health, they are effectively a very large payer in the US. 1 in 3 US patients rely on United. It's actually, and one of their subsidiaries called Change Health were breached. Now, at the moment, so this was the 21st of September. They've only just brought their systems back up today. That means that about 900,000 physicians in the US have not been able to claim and have not been paid for the last 3 weeks. All right, I'll leave that there. You all understand what that means, all right? So and in this instance, there was a ransom of 350 Bitcoin, which is about $22 million, which they paid. However, they still had the downtime of a month to get their systems back. So, this is not about, oh, I pay and I'm back in business. Absolutely not. And I'll touch on something a bit closer to home. So, what will happen now is that United Health are on a, quite a long journey back to health or back to recover. They're going to have to go through this entire process where containing the threat, identifying, which machine or device was patient 0, run an inventory of the data of all their systems. It goes on. This is where you don't want to be stuck in this cycle of recovery, or ever even have to experience this. This is what I do for a living. And I can tell you it's not fun for my clients. So, all right, so on the 1st of June 2020, I was Group Chief Digital Officer at Life Healthcare Group. And this happened. We were hacked. Some of you might remember this. It was quite a big news story for a couple of weeks. Now, as someone who had to face this frontline, literally had to negotiate with criminals wanting ransom, deal with the comms, deal with the complete loss of patient trust, right? People want to know, is my data breached? If it is, where is it? What's happened to it? And we're still trying to run a business in the middle of 2020, in the middle of a hard lockdown. We're seeing this, and as I said, South Africa is seen as a soft target. In the last couple of years, these have been some of the big breaches we've seen in South Africa. So the Department of Justice a few years ago, and then Experian back in 2020, also, I think about 24 million records of us, right? Our records were compromised. TransUnion 2022, about 3 million records compromised. The Law Society of South Africa. More recently, at the end of last year, the Department of Defense, our SSA, Development Bank of SA. A couple of weeks ago, we assisting Tshwane University of Technology. And last week, the CIPC, the Company and Intellectual Property Commission, where all of your PTYs are registered. That data has now gone into the dark web. All right, so what is this dark web? You might have heard about it. If you haven't, I'll give you a quick breakdown. So you must understand the internet as a bunch of layers. the first layer is the surface where we're spending most of our time. It's Google, it's your .coms, your .co.za sites, anything that you are able to access without too much effort. A browser, type in an address, and there you are. The deep web is where you now need some kind of access. You need to sign in. It's your bank account, it's your discovery app, it's your own payment app, it's your practice app. It requires a sign-in, it requires some authentication. And this is not, I mean, you can't just go and randomly search for this data. You're not going to get to it. And then we have the dark web, which is also 5% of the total internet content. The dark web is only accessible using certain tools, special tools, using special protocols. It was created by the US Department of Defense back in, I think it was the end of the Cold War. As the internet came about, they realized this was a much safer way to transmit confidential or secret information anonymously. They didn't need super spies leaving things under benches or whatever the spies do. They were now able to transmit this data securely and anonymously. And that's the exploit that hackers are now using. The fact that they're anonymous, the fact that they are able to move about without being tracked at all. And you know, it does give them a sense of invincibility. So, you know, I've had to study what is inside the mind of a hacker. What motivates this individual to do this? And you get some, I suppose, quite diverse responses, but typically what they will tell you is they enjoy the power. It is a big power trip for them because, you know, it's a stroke of a key. I can be anywhere I want. They don't consider getting in or breaking in the hard part. Absolutely not. In fact, the hard part for them is typically staying undetected and being able to exfiltrate or copy your data off. Many of them see this as, especially where it's not with criminal intent, they're just kind of poking around, like the guys who were poking around at NASA, right? Poking around, they wanted to understand some of their blueprints. They weren't wanting to steal anything. And they often remark that there's a serious lack of security in general, wherever they go. It's almost like, you know, and in many instances, they will sit there for, I mean, the longest we know of is about 2 years. Systematically get more and more access to your systems and your data, and at some point, either take control or ransomware you. There is a lot of financial or profit-driven motivation behind this, but there, you know, of late, with the global conflicts going on, a lot of this is driven as part of political agendas and as part of another means of an offensive strategy. So this United Health breach that I spoke about, the big one in the US that's just recovered today, United Health is probably now, I think it brings up, we probably have about half of all healthcare has been publicly brought down in the US at some point through a data breach or a major systems failure. All right, so at the very heart of a cyber criminal's kind of toolkit, there's really two parts to it. There's the technical skills, programming, and understanding cybersecurity protocols, the real techie stuff. And the other aspect of it is the art of manipulation, being able to manipulate the human beings, because that's the easiest way to get access, isn't it? It's actually really hard to try and, you know, crack into something. It's much easier to distract the receptionist for a couple of minutes, stick a USB drive into her computer, and then you're done, right? So you've just manipulated that human to get access to a system. It can be as simple as that. So we need to almost have a healthy paranoia. You know, if you start seeing things or messages or even communication, and these days with AI and deep fakes, we're able to clone voices, and almost, you know, you may not tell the difference. So if you're seeing a new friend that you've never heard of, sending you a strange message, be suspicious. Healthy paranoia. If the message you're receiving heightens your emotions, be suspicious. If the request has urgency for no reason, if the offer is too good to be true, and this is a classic one. My dad, I've had to train him. He's 82, he's got about 4 devices, and he'll click on anything. So I had to say, Dad, there are consequences. He has been breached. His bank account's been wiped out, and it's kind of, you only learn these lessons once it happens. Also, be suspicious if you're now suddenly receiving help. I mean, the same thing. As South Africans, culturally, it's inbred in us, right? You go to the ATM, you're watching your back. You're parking your car, you're making sure it's locked 3 times, etc., etc. So, same approach to our data security. And then finally, if you are feeling, hey, this doesn't feel right, or I can't verify who this person is, you are potentially being manipulated. And again, with AI, we are starting to see, our jobs becoming far more difficult. We deal with a couple of breaches a month, and what we're now starting to see is something called polymorphic malware. So polymorphic means this thing can almost chameleon-like change at will. It changes its own code. And malware, malicious software. So this thing is a piece of code that can be undetected by the heavy tools that we use. So we're getting to that almost tipping point of, the tech has kind of caught up both for good and bad. All right, so, you've got to start thinking about, very much like in healthcare, hygiene is kind of the first thing you want to deal with. Cyber hygiene has to be our new frontier. Not on the care side, but certainly on the trust side of patient data and all of your notes and research, etc. So very much like healthcare, where you go through phases of early detection with checkups to detect any anomalies in your patient. If you do pick up something, you want to contain that. So, and your body, or our bodies, are going to, our immune system is going to identify that and isolate those pathogens. With, finally, how treating your patient or treating the issue, there has to be some kind of treatment to heal and to remove this pathogen from the body. So, very much parallel in terms of cybersecurity. And this is now happening, and this is why we run a 24/7 business, is we are running checks, scans for any abnormal activity or abnormal behavior. So the same kind of AI that Peter speaks about, we're using some amazing tech from IBM. We probably process around 250 billion log events per month. And all of that has to be brought to our engineers to investigate, right? So out of those billions, we probably do about 10 or 12,000 investigations. And ultimately only end off with about 100 odd serious incidents that require, some urgent attention. And we're using a lot more behavioral analytics these days. We are starting to understand what are your patterns, what's normal for you. You log in at 7:30 every day from the same location, suddenly you are 1,000 Ks away. Is this normal? Should our AI start treating this as abnormal? And in the same way, we will identify, we isolate, you're all familiar with the antivirus and how it works. If you're not, get familiar with it, understand the tool that you're using. And finally for us, restoring systems is about patching and modernizing this. So, we've got to, I think you understand my message. This is everyone's problem. Cyber is a problem for absolutely everybody. So we see the problem statement coming up as, and again, just something for you to just keep at the back of your mind. Do you have visibility across various data silos? So, you own some data, you're sharing some data with your medical schemes, you're sharing data with your hospitals. What is your level of visibility of that data? How are you monitoring? Because often when it's the IT guy's issue. What's the IT guy concerned about? Keeping your business up more than keeping it secure. And you've got to balance that, those priorities. Vulnerability management, very much like an ongoing, are you okay kind of check. We are doing that on all systems we monitor 24/7. Tools you can't manage on your own, hence we do this. The skills hard to retain, hence we do this. So this is why we specialize in this, but we say it is all of our problem. It's not just, you outsource it to us and walk away. Just a couple of steps, for you to take practically into your own lives and into your families as well. First thing is passwords. We all hate them. We've all been taught how to develop good passwords. We're moving away from words to phrases or making up things that mean something to you. But I must say, I think even, as humans, we're fallible when it comes to remembering things. I would recommend finding a good password manager, which typically requires what we'll call multiple forms of authentication. So I would need to know something. I would need to have something, so my face. And I might use various other factors, either a one-time PIN or an email, but you want to use multiple factors for all of the systems that you're using. And remember, something like Google Authenticator is free, and you can start using a tool like that for all of your systems. And if the systems you're buying or to run your practice don't have this level of security, ask your provider to beef up your access systems. Interesting, this is from last year, but this is how long it takes a hacker to crack a password. So if you have a password with numbers, upper and lowercase letters and symbols, I think a lot of us use 8 characters. Who uses 8? 12? Who uses 18? Anyone? So our CTO uses about 18 to 22 characters. So it's going to take trillions of years to crack his password. But for the rest of us, we're using 8 characters, 5 minutes. That's how long it'll take me. Okay. So your backups. Remember, your data is sitting on the phone, on the laptop, on the cloud. It is all over the place. Make sure that your essential data is backed up in at least 3 different places. One offline, if you can, maybe even in a safe. You want to be able to have a working copy of your data. In the event you're ransomware, you could say, not interested, not paying the ransom, don't need my data back, I have a clean copy, right? And that's already a first good place to be if you have to restore after a big attack. So we talk about, I think we just mentioned virus or antivirus casually. Go have a look at that tool or ask your IT team, how is this thing set up? What is it looking for? Is it only looking for signatures on viruses? Is it looking for behavior? Is it looking for anomalies in what I do? Start understanding what level of protection you have. Okay, so social media, my favorite topic. It's become prolific. I think it's like it's too late. You can't get off it. You're there. Maybe I'll use this example. First day of school. We're all proud to take our kids into school, nice new uniforms, and take pictures and post it on Facebook, right? Right there, I now know your child's name, which school they go to, what time you drop them off, and if your car is in the picture as well, I know a whole lot more because I have your registration number. We run a service that also I can literally, with one piece of information, either your full name, your ID number, your car registration number, your home address, your CK number from SIPC, I can pretty much pull what I call a CIA report. I can find everything about you, absolutely everything, with one piece of information. And yet we are posting lots of information every day on social media. This pertains to our businesses as well, right? LinkedIn, yeah, it's kind of the Facebook for business, I suppose, but we must be careful about what we share. Remember I spoke about manipulation. So if I know Peter's pedigree, and I approach Peter for knowing that he wants to invest in cool, sexy health tech projects, and I come up and say, hey Peter, I've got $1 million from an investor, let's do something together. He's never met me before, but I've studied him. I've studied everything he's written, I've studied everything he's spoken about. I know Peter better than he knows him on most days. And that's how I will execute my attack on Peter. Guess what? I'm not putting up the $1 million. He will eventually be putting up the $1 million. Right? Watch, these scammer movies give you a lot of ideas on how the real world is going. So don't give them data they don't need. or information they don't need. I think I said earlier, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. My dad clicking on stuff, there you go. Phishing. So phishing's an interesting one. Again, it's this, the art of manipulation. How do I contact my new friend Peter to eventually squeeze $1 million out of him? Probably email, because I can find his email on the internet. You got a couple of them on the internet. I can find any one of them, and I know he'll respond to that. And this is the hacker's kind of tool of choice. Is starting off with a phishing email, either forcing you to click on something, follow a link, open an attachment, and boom, their malicious software is now loaded onto your device. And remember, your phones are susceptible to this as well. Your updates, if Microsoft or Apple are telling you update your software, update your software. This is not a suggestion. It very much needs to happen as quickly as they release these things. And then we have a principle in cybersecurity called zero trust. And we actually design systems and design security architecture with zero trust in mind, meaning trust no one, verify everyone every time, right? So just take that back into how are you allowing access to your data? Do you trust? Who do you trust? And are you verifying them every time, right? And I mean, as doctors, as healthcare professionals, I know a lot of you have learned to trust your gut. Trust your gut when it comes to security as well. This is going to be probably, that if it feels wrong, it's probably going south quickly. We also recognize, and this is why we do these talks, we recognize that there is a massive education gap, or even an understanding of what is actually going on. I spoke about the dark web. When we study the dark web, or we look up artifacts in the dark web, you can literally buy absolutely anything. Drugs, firearms, body parts. This is where the human trafficking operates out of. This is where terrorist groups operate out of. This is where hacking groups operate out of. So it's a real underbelly of the internet. So what are you looking at? So remember, it's not just what you click on. It's not just what you, the email you respond to or the attachment you open. It's also the websites you're going to, right? So be careful about getting to a website that looks like, free streaming site. These are favorites. Or a site that's just filled with ads all over the place. You can't get to any content without clicking on an ad. These are not going to be good sites for you to spend time on. And my own thoughts about this is if you can't afford security, then you can't afford a breach. We had, I was still at Life Healthcare. We had one of the radiology practices in a hospital, one of the smaller practices, but they were still using legacy system for the radiology apparatus. Hadn't been updated, and no one bothered because it was offline, wasn't connected to the internet. Guess what? It was. Nobody knew that the receptionist, when there was no radiology going on, she would sometimes jump onto that machine and check her email on it because it was closer in the X-ray room than back at her workstation. So she was connecting to the internet, and that's how they got breached. The ransom they wanted, I think it was about R1 million they wanted, and it was a small radiology practice. We eventually negotiated them down to 20,000 rand. They were fine with that, and we got the key and decrypted all of the data, and happy doctor at the end, because guess what? That breach had held up some cancer treatment for about 4 or 5 days. And they were also afraid that if they had a total loss, all of those treatment histories were gone. All right, so we've got to be, I think, I've given you so many things to remember, but do take this seriously. Do have conversations with your IT provider, And our contact details are here at the end. So I'll just leave you to read this quickly, but this should give you a sense of how much of your data is out there. And I mean, this is kind of tongue-in-cheek, but is it embarrassing data? Is it sensitive data? Do I want people knowing where I live? Do I want them knowing about my medical conditions? No, I don't. And by the way, Peter, just like you used AI to write your prezzo, I used AI to write this. I gave it a couple of bits of information and said, write an embarrassing email that an AI could send autonomously to a customer or a patient. And that's what it came up with. Right? So this is happening to us already. So we've got to be thinking about what of our data is out there. You don't want to be a Jenny. Many of us have shared a lot more data than Jenny, by the way. And I think that is the point. Go and do a little bit of an audit of what you've got out there. All right, so just as I wrap up, I want to extend a free offer to all of you attending. And Peter, we must actually extend it into the rest of the expo. For a cybersecurity assessment. We do a basic assessment. We were actually thinking of having kind of a security in a box offer. But the challenge with that is, if you run a 1-doctor practice and someone else is running a 3-doctor practice and someone else has a 10-doctor practice, or you then move into a hospital, mini hospital environment, your needs are different, your systems are different, your exposure is different. Hence, a personalized assessment is going to be the trick. When we do this assessment, we also assess your team's behaviors to how they use data and how they behave around technology. So I hope that this has been insightful. I hope that it hasn't scared you too much. I want to remind you that in the healthcare industry is the most targeted industry, long before energy and governments and etc. And the wars going on. Literally, the United Health attack was, guess what? A Russian hacking group, sponsored by the Russian government, against a massive US healthcare organization, taking out payments for about half of the US for 3 weeks. Third World War has begun, right? This is happening in cyberspace. So thanks, folks. Thanks for your attention. Let me see if I can get this back. There you go. Thanks, Joey. I don't know if there are any questions.
Thank you, Suren. Yes, is there anybody that's got a question? We've got a question over here.
Yeah.
Let's start here with Megan.
Phone. Let me get behind you, sorry.
Suren, what is your prediction about phishing strategies moving from email to WhatsApp?
Not recommended. I'll tell you why, right? So as soon as you're moving data to different platforms, you now just created another copy of it, effectively. As much as it's here and it's on an app. So I think actually I was at IBM when the IBM CEO famously said, we will stop using email at IBM. That was about 10 years ago. They still use a lot of email. You cannot get away from email. And I hear you about moving to WhatsApp. It's not necessarily more secure. It's just another channel.
I'm asking more from the hacker's point of view. Will
Yeah.
they start using phishing strategies on WhatsApp?
Oh, on WhatsApp. Absolutely. Absolutely, yes.
Thanks.
So yes, so using your mobile is not, I mean, look, you get these unsolicited marketing calls all the time, right? It starts there. And as I said, all you need one piece of information to build an entire, yes, WhatsApp, messaging platform, anything where you're contactable. And by the way, on voice as well, right? Not just a WhatsApp. There are actually some very scary apps right now. I can clone your voice. I can get it to sound exactly like you. Your mom would not know the difference. Okay.
Hi. Is there a big difference between a paid-for antivirus versus a free version?
Typically, it's in the features. And when I say features, I'll explain that. So your basic antivirus is looking for something that's been seen before, right? Or has some kind of signature that it can identify. And that's a basic function. Your more advanced, and we don't even call them antivirus anymore. They're actually automated detection and response solutions. So these things are able to pick up your behavior and then automatically either block the threat or alert you or kill the process that's causing the issue. So it is worth exploring proper paid for software, not only for the added features, but also for the support you get, right? And remember, I mean, maybe I should ask, who's got, I'm sure you all have antivirus on your laptops, but who's got antivirus on your phone? See, he's remembered from a few years ago in Cape Town, right? Yeah. Why not? Why don't you have antivirus on your phone? Your emails here, your WhatsApps here, your browsing histories here. No antivirus. You should have a VPN on your phone. You should have multi-factor authentication on your phone. You shouldn't just let apps open as soon as it sees you. I'm making you think about how our own practices. Sorry, sir.
Hi, thank you very much. It's indeed very insightful. Now I'm really worried about how secure is a banking app. Because
Banking.
mine is only using 4 digits. You said like you can break it immediately.
Yeah. Look, our banking exposure is massive, which is why a bank like ABSA has about 7,000 people in IT and about 700 or 800 of them are security people, right? So that's how seriously the bank's taking security. Nothing is unhackable. Let's put it, that is the first thing we need to know. Hence, it's a 24/7 thing. It's an ongoing defensive strategy that we have to have. Our own business, again, running 24/7, even though there isn't a lot going on at night, I have to be awake, or my team has to be awake in case. And in case something happens, I have to respond within about 15 minutes and fix a major incident within a couple of hours. Otherwise, it snowballs. Yeah, so your banks, look, your bank, your medical insurers, your life insurer, anyone who is holding valuable data about you, yes, go and re-look at how you're accessing that data. I mean, a recent scam I should tell you about, and you asked about, Megan asked about WhatsApp, is, I think actually you guys might have heard about this restaurateur in Pretoria. He was kidnapped, and they kept him so that he could open his phone with his face, and then obviously wipe out his bank accounts, but then went into all his other apps. He had 3 or 4 different bank accounts and cleared them all out, right? So purely because he had everything working off his face, right? And no other form of authentication. We now have, for example, CEOs who will walk around with a little, it looks like a USB stick, but it only works, so they're only able to log into a device. If they plug this in, put their fingerprint on that device, put in a code on that device, and then get in, right? So this is how far it's gotten, because CEO gets kidnapped, we can get the company to transfer massive amounts of money if he's under duress. So these are the extents to which people are going.
I've got a
Hi.
question here in the front as well.
Touching on the aspect of cloning and obviously that's linking to security breaches, how does one navigate the use of AI tools like ChatGPT that you'd use in the normal course of your practice? And what healthy behaviors should one adopt?
Yeah, so I think Peter gave us some, it's a louder. I think, is this on? Oh, I think Peter gave us some good advice, specifically around how to use commercial products that are on the internet. It's actually a simple behavior. I practice this. Pause. Before you do anything that's about to have implications, pause and just recheck. and actually I think a lot of you have built this into the way you practice medicine. You're going to pause and just rethink, am I on the right track? Because this thing is taking me down a particular path I have to commit. So you got to pause. I would also say that don't, that zero trust principle, do not trust anyone in your circle, especially your staff. As much as you may have been all working together for 20 years, it doesn't, in fact, we have a theory that if everyone, we say everyone has a price to do something, or to look the other way. I wouldn't even say to do something illegal, just to look the other way. That price right now is equal to about your kids' school fees, right? If I said I'm going to cover your kids' next year's school fees, just look the other way for 5 minutes. No one's going to get hurt. It is easy to buy people off. There's a lot of money behind getting to data, because there's a lot of money that can be made by exploiting data.
Quick,
Go ahead, sir.
all right, quick one. With practices obviously moving away from paper and digitalizing, we end up using these practice management systems. So now the biggest risk there, is it at the level of the user, meaning at my practice, or is it at the level of where the information is kept, meaning wherever they cloud it or however?
Fantastic. That's a fantastic question. Thank you for that. So your practice management system is sitting in the cloud. It's rare that you're going to have something on your site. Your points of vulnerability, I would say your biggest risk is in your practice, not with your provider. However, I've just told you that Change Health took out the whole US healthcare payment system for a couple of weeks. There is also the third-party threat. Your practice app provider is also exposed. They are targeted. Because remember, they're a bigger prize than your practice. That's everyone's data. This is just your data. So I think we must look at it as, what can we control? You can control your own team. Perfect. Train them, keep them aware of threats, run little simulations with them so that they understand what it looks normal, but it actually can be quite dangerous. And then have those conversations with your software provider or your solution provider. They must be able to give you assurances that your data will remain confidential. Your data, remember, as healthcare data, it is privileged identifiable data, not just personal identifiable data, privileged data. Why? Because I've got my HIV status and a whole lot of other health information, etc. You also retain data for minors, which again is privileged data. So you're suddenly dealing with a whole different category of data as far as the information regulator sees it. Hence, start with your people and have that conversation with your provider. I would say that if you address access, and if you have a high level of visibility into who's gone in where or who has access to what data, that's already going to give you some peace of mind that you have control. And then the next part is, because you're going to start seeing, and I think this is where it's going, your industry is going, is certainly that digital engagement with the patient is starting to happen, right? You're starting to say to the patient, here's your appointment on WhatsApp. Or download this app, here's the patient version, here's your entire record, we're fully digitized, we're fantastic. Are you managing the patient's access to that data? Right, remember, even though you've now given the patient a copy of their own data, you're still the custodian. That's the way the regulator sees it. So, yeah, you've got to take responsibility for this and be transparent with your patients to say, I am putting these extra clauses in, or you need to re-sign some T's and C's because transparency, because I take responsibility. Right? So there's a number of things. Deal with it from a sort of policy perspective. Address it with your training, with your team. Address it with your provider. And just be, healthy paranoia goes a long way to keep yourself safe.
Okay, we've got one at the back there.
Hi.
Right.
So I just want to find out from your experience, how important do you think it is for a practice or anybody else to have cyber insurance?
Very important, but also very difficult. So, our breach at Life Healthcare, good example. when we went to renew the insurance in the course of the year, our cover was halved and our premium was doubled, right? So that's the dilemma with cyber, is that as soon as your perceived threat is higher, you're either not going to qualify for insurance or it's going to be very expensive. So if you stay in touch with us, we are busy working on a product which is more an assurance product as opposed to an insurance product. So let's imagine the journey will go on. We'll do an assessment for you. We'll give you an idea of your risks, and we'll give you an idea of what you need urgently and the essentials. Potentially, we then take on your services and charge you per month and keep you secure, right? At this point, you are now going to qualify for insurance, certainly. But at this point, we're also saying if we are providing that insurance or recovery insurance, we are also the provider. Therefore, it's like having the tracker in your car. You're going to pay less, and we can find it if it gets stolen. So if you just stay in touch with us, we'll be launching something in a couple of months. I would, though, in the meantime, look at some kind of insurance. The banks are doing it. You know, your bank would give you at least a level of light insurance, at least to cover the financial impact of any downtime you might have. And think if you're a doctor in the US right now. You have not been able to claim, nor have you been paid in 3 weeks. What would that do to your practice? That's why I say, you know, it's if you can't afford the security, you can't afford the breach.
We're going to take one last question over here.
Hi, thanks, Suren.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, in terms of your cyber risk assessments, what are you actually looking at, and what solutions are you using? Is it intrusive at all, or is it just scanning the environment?
No, non-intrusive. So we, it's kind of two parts. We obviously have a discussion with you, just to understand your perceptions. Because we all think we're doing great until we show you some reality. So we have a conversation. We have an appliance, a small computer. We bring it into your environment. We plug it in, and it then sits there for a couple of days. It scans your environment, pulls all your traffic, looks at all of your logins and system logs, etc. And from that, we're able to analyze and report on what we see. So it's not intrusive at all. We literally just probably need your IT team just to give us an IP address and access to your network. And we do this in a couple of days.
Thank you, Suren. Thank you so
Terry.
much. I think that was very insightful, and I think we all are looking at our devices in a totally different light now, and what we are putting onto our devices. Just a little something to say thank you for your participation and involvement. If you have any questions for Suren, please you're welcome to come and chat with him. You can also chat with us afterwards if you want to give us your information to get into contact with